Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for Thinking on Sunday from Conway Hall. This afternoon we're very lucky to have Jay Griffiths. She's written for many magazines that you'll recognise and broadcast for the BBC. She's the author of Wild, and her latest book is Why Rebel, and it's out from Penguin. Our footprint on the earth has never mattered more because nature isn't just a hobby, it's the life on which we depend. We need a politics of kindness, but the very opposite is on the rise. Libertarianism, fascism with all of its triumphal brutalism, its racism and its misogyny, will this give us what we need? So this afternoon, thank you to Jay for answering the question, why rebel? Over to you, Jay.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I also wanted to say welcome to Wales, because although you may not know it, that is where I am. And so you are in a strange kind of way with me here. Welcome. I'm going to do a talk for about 40 minutes, and I do have a couple of props just to be warned. So I really wish that everyone who said they believed in angels would actually believe in insects. Thanks to the insects, we have food, but it is also insects who tactfully and quietly remove the dead. Without them, we would be wading through corpses at every step. They do not take the title of angels, being by nature bashful and unassuming. They go by other names: firefly, bee, ant, caddisfly. But we humans, it seems, value irreal angels more than the priceless reality of insects. We need the living world, that truest of worlds, both in death and in life. Thanks to other animals, human life is vitalized. Animals, their senses alert to every scent and whisper. Through their paws, antennae, wingtips and noses are our guides and healers. Mindedness surrounds us in air and water, on land and in the soil under our feet, where the lovely, holy worm, in sweet complicity with the dreaming earth, quickens death itself to life. And in the transforming dark, trees are messaging each other through their roots, and where tree roots link with fungi, the network of underground awareness is able to respond differently to the presence of different creatures. Awareness surrounds us, tingling. Perhaps nowhere is so full of life as the forest of the Amazon, bursting, writhing, tickling and rotting. Death itself is merely matter, re-quickened into something else, because everything is a part of the shape-shifting metamorphosis at the green core of life. In the Amazon, I felt as never before that I had touched the quick of the thing. I had put my finger to the pulse at the heart of the world in an experience of empathy with that wildest of creatures, the jaguar. Indigenous societies in the Amazon have never forgotten the mindedness of life, honouring it with a way of thinking that is empathetic, willing to cross borders, linking with other species, a way of walking immersed in the true world, sensitive to its ethic. How we walk the earth has never mattered more than now. How we treat it in the spirit of gift or theft, a bill or a prayer, has never been more important, not only for the intrinsic value of the living world, but for humanity's health and well-being. In a startling demonstration, the coronavirus that so traumatized the world was unleashed by our destruction of forest habitat and the slaughter of wild creatures. Where were you when the music stopped? Everything ceased. Schools closed, churches were shut, the pubs were silent, friends couldn't meet. We cancelled everything to fight the virus: weddings, work, exams, football, theatre. We stopped doing everything except the very thing that had caused the virus in the first place, annihilating the living world. So forests have been destroyed for cattle to feed the insatiable appetite for beef. Wildlife is slaughtered for tame life, as soya is grown on previously forested land to feed the chicken industry. And bereft of their seclusion in the forests, wild creatures were forced into contact, so the virus jumped to humans. Astonishingly, the cause was quietly noted, yet nothing was done. Although humans are just 0.01% of all life, we have destroyed 83% of wild mammals, and we have done so without awareness. Now, aghast, we are beginning to see and to name the human conscience needs to be corroborate with the natural world and aligned to its ethic, furthering a politics of kindness. But that political stance that is the opposite of kindness is on the rise, that libertarian fascism, openly so in some countries. And in the case of Brazil, where it launches its assault on the Amazon and the peoples of the earth who live within those forests, it is a chiaroscuro of cruelty. Here, as I absolutely know you know, is a face mask. The face mask, I would say, is an emblem of kindness. It doesn't protect the wearer, but it protects others. It is inherently public-spirited. Its ethos is communal. It's an expression of considerateness, particularly for the vulnerable. In a pandemic, such as COVID-19, the values that are and were needed include kindness, concern, and humanity. But the countries that suffered the most, the USA under Trump, Brazil, the UK, and now India, had leaders who were capable only of the opposite qualities. Where humility was needed to heed advice and to act with care and caution, they displayed a reckless superbia. Where compassion was required to protect the vulnerable, they responded with cruelty and carelessness. Where respect for limitations was necessary, wearing masks and obeying lockdown rules, they showed their contemptuous desire to be free of such fetters. That refusal to wear face masks was politicized, but it was far more than a detail of partisan identity. It was an eloquent and significant expression of the creep of far-right libertarianism. In Brazil, President Bolsonaro admires dictators including Pinochet, nationalist, homophobic, misogynist. He's also dangerously racist towards indigenous people. It's a shame, he said, it's a shame that the Brazilian cavalry hasn't been as efficient as the Americans who exterminated the Indians. Bolsonaro has vetoed COVID-19 aid for indigenous people, saying such provisions are, quotes, against the public interest. Due to COVID-19, Brazil lost a generation of indigenous leaders and elders, and with their deaths went much of the tribal culture and the medicine that they knew. We are facing extermination, they have said. Meanwhile, wanting to end indigenous rights to their territories, Bolsonaro has encouraged land raids to soar and has spoken of giving the ranchers guns. At the center of libertarianism is a contempt for the weak. They recognize no victims, only people who play victim. Libertarians hate regulations that protect others, be it environmental laws or face mask regulations. Libertarians loathe fetters on their personal freedom. They perceive the face mask as a muzzle. As libertarians promote the idea of free speech at any price and enjoy the practice of hate speech, as they campaign against all libel laws and cancel culture, so a masked mouth covered and silenced is the emblem of what they most detest, because libertarianism loathes any tether or shackle or constraint. This liberty, this so-called freedom, is actually freedom for the few. It drives unfettered capitalism and the unregulated industry that allows some to live like gods while forcing others to live like cattle. Characteristics such as kindness, modesty, slowness, generosity, receptivity, pity, honesty, and truth are detested by the libertarian outlook, for they are the fettered emotions. In honesty, you are bound to tell the truth. You are tied by respect, linked to others by love, tethered by kindness to a kinship with nature, and restrained by a sense of justice and conscience. Libertarians loathe political correctness because it puts the brakes on bigotry, restricts racism, and reins in sexism. But what has been set in motion is an ideology of monoism, without plurality or otherness, furious for its own freedom, an idiot divinity unleashed upon the world, dishonest, deceitful, power-hungry, and lacking in empathy. For some people, the idea of metaphor may not obviously be a political subject, but to me it is. I see politics very much in a kind of deep cultural sense, often also in a sort of Westminster sense. But I think that metaphor is very interesting. It's a crucial way in which the human mind practices empathy. I'm not talking of metaphor as a kind of literary device, the kind of thing you might learn in school or studying English literature, but it's a stance of the psyche. It's a way of understanding otherness and making stories of connection and relation. Metaphor comprehends the world of spirit and imagination. It deals in pluralities and the unmeasurable. It doesn't seek to deceive, but rather to augment what is true. It is essential to all kinds of understanding. Metaphor is the opposite of rhetoric, and it works like anti-fascism in the human mind. Both art and shamanism use that realm of metaphor where emotion is expressed and where healing happens. With the metaphoric vision, empathy flows, knowing no borders. I was very struck when I was researching the libertarians how remarkable their speech was in its almost complete lack of any form of metaphor, of any form of empathy. By contrast, both artist and shaman create harmony with that sense of metaphor that links the individual with other individuals in the wider environment. It's a way of thinking essential for life. But ours is an age of lethal literalism, which viciously attacks metaphoric insight and all its values, an age which burns the Amazon and mocks those who would protect it, sing it, and become it. An age which physically destroys the sacred sites and art of Indigenous cultures. There was a cave sacred to Indigenous Australians in the Pilbara region that demonstrated 46,000 years of continual occupation through the last ice age and into living memory. It was exploded in seconds by the mining company Rio Tinto. They simply detonated one of the oldest sacred monuments in the world, blew it up in a few minutes, one day in 2020. I want to tell you about what I call the honey guide rule, because there is a bird called the honey guide, and it is so called because it knows where the bee's nest is, but it cannot actually get the honey out on its own. It needs human hands to break open the hive, while humans in turn need the bird to guide them to the right tree. Hence the honey guide rule that a happy human to animal relationship depends on reciprocal exchange. The honey guide is an emblem of the best kind of relationship between humans and the more than human world, leading the psyche to sweetness. When the relationship is at its best, creatures can draw us humans into their worlds, from the water boatman or a pet cat or a wild deer. They are the filaments of our tenderness, the reach beyond our grasp, the extension of our empathy, the wings of our minds. To be happy, The senses need to be stimulated, and through animals our senses grow. We can extend ourselves out through their senses into worlds of unquenchable richness. Each creature lives paws outwards, reaching into the world with arms, tentacles, antennae, and fingers. Compared to many animals, we are beginners in the sense of smell. We are newcomers to sight, inexpert in the audible realm. And for our own safety, we need to listen to their sensed communications, as before a tsunami, for instance, they listen to each other, and heeding the warnings can save themselves. There is a different kind of tsunami coming, but theirs are still the voices or the silences we need to attend. We seek an invitation into the world of fur and feathers, because the true, deep sense of life is formed of intermindedness. I got you, I understand. Koalas, like living teddy bears, epitomize the sweet, furry world that children and clear-hearted adults cherish. To have one wrapped in my arms, to stroke it, to love it, to protect it and hug it, press my nose to its nose. I don't know if anything in the world would make me happier. I think you need to go now, Kawana. Everything has and tells a story. Everything communicates through its own language and its own law, say Indigenous Australian Yolngu people. Indigenous cultures have kept faith with the animals as part of what it means to belong. The world is larger and more vivid when animals and birds and insects are imbued with spirit and significance, when there is mind of unknowable diversity, elastic and ecstatic, until the very air is electric with message and there are more stories than stars. But the communication between animals and humans is sometimes a terrible reproach. I have always wanted to hear a koala call. I have never wanted to hear one cry for help. Its fur singed, its paws and nose burned, crying little bleats of bewilderment and whimpering with pain in the arms of the Australian woman who rescued it in one of the bushfires caused by the climate crisis. Something in me died that day, and I'm not alone. We need their well-being, their voice, their happiness, their life. For Indigenous Australians, the soil, the earth, contains the ancestors, not only the human ones, but the ancestor spirits who traveled the land in the dreaming. And the earth, they say, is alive with them still. Indigenous cultures very commonly assert that the land has consciousness. More, the land, many say, dreams us. This beautiful enigmatic idea contains a vastness of vision, seeing our place on earth as a kind of dream. The dominant culture is now rediscovering the knowledge that Indigenous cultures have long intuited there is mindedness beneath it. And it takes a certain cast of mind to find mind under the soles of our feet. It takes a kneeling humility to regard and to respect the mind beneath us that has been called the wood wide web. Only 60 harvests are left before soils are too degraded to feed the projected world population, the United Nations has warned. The forecasts vary. Some say we have 100 harvests and some say 30. I don't really see the difference, because inherent to the idea of harvests is that even if they fluctuate, they will always happen. Harvest means abundance in time, as perennial and certain as autumn, eternity on earth. It is grotesque to imagine this limitlessness made finite. Soil contains life and creates it, not only directly with agriculture, but in the larger realm of the climate crisis, for soil holds more carbon than all of Earth's plant life, and it can absorb more depending on the life within it. In devastated soils or with the excessive use of synthetic fertilizers, the balance switches from absorbing carbon to releasing it. The relationship between carbon and soil is so entwined that the climate crisis cannot be halted while the soil continues to be devastated. It is that simple and that vital. About a third of the world's soil, approximately the surface area of Mexico and the USA, is thought to have been degraded over the last 40 years. Many civilizations have lasted about 1,000 years and then collapsed. Interestingly, one of the key shared factors is the way that these civilizations collapsed, exhausting the soil on which they depended. Indigenous cultures typically cherish the below as a source of life and wisdom and dream and ethics. You might ask, by the way, why I'm quoting Indigenous cultures so much. You might even ask whether I have the right to do so. What I would say is that when I'm quoting Indigenous cultures, these are things that I've been told, or these are things that Indigenous people have very directly said, sometimes to anthropologists, sometimes to other writers. And I think it is extremely important that their wisdom is acknowledged and honoured. I don't see it as cultural appropriation, I see it as profound respect. So Indigenous cultures typically cherish the below as a source of life and dream and ethics. Indigenous Australians say, law comes up from the land. What is underneath us teaches respect for all life. But the dominant culture privileges what is above rather than what is below. It looks up rather than down. We pay respects to Her Royal Highness. We pray to God in the highest. We aim for the heights of success. We speak with contempt for the lowest of the low. And Donald Trump revoltingly refers to Black Lives Matter protesters as low life. Soil is treated with contempt because it is beneath us. And we English speakers misuse the word soil, so that something soiled expresses not just disdain, but visceral disgust, speaking with revulsion of the very thing that sustains us. Indigenous people often express their earth ethos in that simple but deep observation, we are the land, speaking as, quotes, people of the earth, who retain their humble relationship to the humus, the earth, that commonwealth of humility under our feet. And those words, humus, human, humility, are all related words. Humus means earth or ground, apart from the chickpea variety. Humus means earth or ground. Humble means lowly because it is near to the ground. Human reminds us that we are made of earth. And if humility were imagined as a visible thing, it would be soil. Quiet, brown, soft, maintaining networks underground and feeding the whole of the living world. The land dreams us truly. We who live on earth, whose minds are soil-wise by starlight, are both the dreamers and the dreamed. But this is the age of the Endlings, the very last individuals of their species, final and forlorn, at whose death the species is extinct. That word, Endling, is the saddest word I know in any language. An Endling is the very epitome of tragedy, and the word was coined appropriately in this age of extinction, this strange age of our dawning knowing, seeing the unhallowed horror that is approaching. Words with that suffix ling are diminutive, tender, poignant. We speak of a foundling and a starveling, often bird-related, a nestling and a fledgling. And one endling is a bird, a little female bird called Essa, the lonely one. She is looked after in Java, but at her death, a world ends. I will write for her. And in my book, Why Rebel, I write a letter to an endling. Dear Essa, your name Essa means the only one in human language, the lonely one. After your last heartbeat, a world will be gone forever. Not, people think, an important one, only yours, but your only world. After your last flight to freedom will be gone forever. Not, people think, an important one, only yours, but your only freedom. After your last song, a category of music will be silenced forever. Not, people think, an important one, only yours, but your only song, and the only one you ever wanted to hear sung back to you. For while you live, you can sing your female laughing thrush call all you like, and no male will ever answer you, and you will never know why. Your story happened because of the slaughter of songbirds. In flocks once, then trapped, traded and caged, sentenced to solitary, forced to sing solo, bird sorrow for a status symbol. You are a nervous bird. In the photograph I have of you, you look frightened. Your eyes are an orange circle with a black center, and you don't like being in the eye line of your keepers. You are easily stressed and would rather be hidden in deep foliage, tucked in thickets of forests. You have never wanted to call attention to yourself, except for a mate, but now you have the cachet of true tragedy, your kind, the rufous-fronted laughing thrush, subspecies slamatensis, is named as the world's next most likely known extinction. You, exactly you, Essa, one single individual bird are the last. Your death will mark its extinction. You, Essa, the lonely one, as the last individual of your kind, are an endling. This is what extinction sounds like, the silencing of song that should have been forever yours. Forever yours, Jay. Imagining a world without wings fills me with an inconsolable sorrow. A wren, hungry and songless, a swift dropping to its death, the air emptied of life. Without insects and birds, we rob ourselves of all that flight represents. The wings of mind, the flight of imagination, that mother of empathy. Recent studies are clear about the collapse of the insect world. We know it directly from our own experience. Gone is the windshield phenomenon, whereby driving in summer, it will be necessary to stop frequently to clean the insects from the windscreen. While the moth snowstorm, that blizzard of moths in the headlights, was the experience of every night drive. Hidden in their very tininess, insects are together a gigantic collective of kindness, dancing in constant attendance to living things. The insects pollinate 3/4 of our food crops and 80% of wildflowering plants and keep the soil healthy, recycling nutrients. From their actions flow the countless forms of life, from the apple blossom to bread and roses and the silver salmon, indeed, everything that has ever flowered and ever will. And from physical life flows everything to be treasured in human life, from existence itself to the highest of the arts. It's ultimately thanks to the insects that we owe the flowering of culture as well as of plants. Michelangelo salutes them. Notre Dame bows in thanks. No insects, no Mozart. They give us choirs of insects, flights of insects, sing thee to thy rest. Without them, there would be no chorus of frogs or birdsong. For how would a bird sing without insects to give it life and music? To them we owe everything, my life and yours and yours and yours. Please tell me you understand the immensity of this. And if you don't, please think, alone and quietly perhaps, of this unfolding ending. Let me speak simply into the simplicity of your heart then. And let me just ask you what you love. What makes you happy? Is it a child? Is it your partner? Do you love your friend, or do you love your rose garden? Do you love your dog, your cats, your church, your home? Do you love the pub? Do you love chess, football, or theatre? Do you love the meaning that you've made of your life, maybe your health, your status, your honor, or all of these? And this love then, this happiness that you hold so dear, tell me how it will even exist without the tiniest of beings, the insects against which we have been so utterly pitiless, without the insects for the food and the flowers and the soil. Insecticides should be made illegal overnight. Every scrap of land turned to organic agriculture, every shred of mental energy requisitioned for love, essentially the love of life. The birds, those winged messengers, can read the news, and they know it for a grievous truth, and they are flying starving into the great silence, while we call ourselves sapient. It was the studies of insect collapse reported late in 2018 that first made me cry for insects. The horror of it swept over me. I cried for 3 days. I hate all kinds of bullying. And the fact that the insects are the tiniest creatures bullied by humans acting as monsters gave the facts an edge of very personal pain. But it was, of course, infinitely more than this. I saw in one awful moment a vision of the desolated world, a devastated wasteland. Writers sometimes tell their readers when they struggle for words, when they experience writer's block, or when their psyches demand a fallow period. That admission is a touching one, and it's a truth so precious I do not use it lightly now. But I will use it. The magnitude of this situation silences me. The words I lean towards are not enough. Tears, maybe. The raw scream of rage and pity, perhaps. But what words do you suggest I use here? Annihilation? The end of worlds? The last generation? Absolute apocalypse? If you were looking this full in the face, what to you expresses it sufficiently? A savage anger overcomes me. This is not a game. Protecting insects, children, and life itself is a necessary duty incumbent on us all. With the insects gone, we would lose the birds, the reptiles and the snakes, the gold day dust gecko, the thorny dragon, the sea turtle, the rainbow boa, iridescent and nocturnal. But what is the point of listing all that would be lost? Because we would lose, to put it bluntly, almost everything. Starvation would stalk the land for almost every kind of creature, including ourselves. I don't want to be lyrical now. I just want to swear. The collective stupidity renders all my craft useless. What writer's art can ever convey the vast, deadly, and deliberate slaughter, with all its consequences that are, in sum, the sum of it all, the everything? Where to go with this gigantic stupidity? What the fuck did we think we were doing? And why the fuck are we still doing it? Intensive agriculture is killing us by killing the insects. If I sent a tweet, I would only write this: mass use of insecticides leads to mass death of insects. And I'm like, duh, who knew? For fuck's sake. What can you and I do right now? Heed the climate crisis. Do things that seem small but are not. Turn off outdoor lights at night. Only ever eat organic food. I beg you, I implore myself. And when you say you can't afford it, I really understand. And speak about it. Don't be silent. Tell everyone around you. Tell everyone in power. Take it to your council. Vote without compromise for Green politicians. Sit outside the office of your political representative and don't leave. Anyone who really allows themselves to take in the magnitude of this ending, this threat to the very existence of us, feels the weight of world sorrow. And others at that time, late in 2018, felt it too. A friend of mine had gone to a festival, and she came round to my house afterwards with a little leaflet. It was very tatty and it was very muddy. And she said, I met your friend Shane at the festival. And Shane said, please give this to Jay. She will love this. Little tatty leaflet. Never has one leaflet made such an impression on me. 2 words, extinction and rebellion. I could taste those words. They meant something. They spoke absolutely to exactly, not just my heart, but the moment that we're in. I can't taste terms like habitat loss or pollution. They carry lifelessness within them. When we're told that we need insects for the function and services they provide, it's cold language, cold as coins on corpse eyes. Words of heart are needed, truth and rage, as Extinction Rebellion articulates, because this is a crisis of deadly stupidity like no other. No war matches it, no genocide, and there is nothing greater than to be in service to this, the life on which any chance of a happy future depends. Being alive in this age puts on us all a mantle of responsibility of a wholly different order. So here then, the causes for rebellion: survival and awe, beauty and necessity, grace and grief. There is an uprising of life and rebellion for life, as Extinction Rebellion says. Those who are grief-struck and furious, for the tawny ones, the creatures of feather and fur, demanding that the media and governments tell the truth about the emergency we are in, fighting for life in this shared wild home. I have felt the grief once, diving in a coral reef at its dying moment as it glows a luminous, ringing blue, ultramarine, ultra-dying. And I have been imprisoned in the cells for my activism for climate and against extinction. I write in my book about my arrest and trial and the judge's response in tears, saying, thank you, you have to succeed. Only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And they're lining up now to write rebellion across the skies. Why rebel? Because nature is not a hobby. It is the life on which we depend. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jay. That was very moving. We do have some questions. People are already engaging with this. We've got a question from one of our regular attendees, Rona. Rona, I'm going to try and switch you on here so that you can ask the question yourself. You have to unmute yourself, which you've done. Right, go ahead, see if we can hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Great. Hello. Thank you very much, Jay, for your talk this afternoon. I found it very moving and I was in complete agreement with it. The other day I found a spider in my flat who was quite weak and dehydrated, and I put it outside in the hopes that it will find some more nourishment out of doors than it found in my flat. So I respect insects as much as you do, and I don't talk about it very much because my friends don't quite see things the same way. But the other day I gave some bee pollination tablets to my friend who has, my dear friend Katie, who's got an allotment. So I'm very much with you on what you were saying, Jay. I do have a question, and it's about the politics of kindness. I very much support policies that have not been supported by the last few governments of the UK. The most recent Prime Minister who supported the welfare state to the extent that I do with Gordon Brown, and he was a Labour Prime Minister. Since then, we've had Conservatives or Conservative Liberal Democrat coalitions, but up till 2020, the Labour Party was being led by somebody who has an allotment and has a very had a very sophisticated policy for a Green New Deal, and believed in the politics of kindness. And he was sabotaged by the people within his own party who did not want to be in government. To me, he represented the politics of kindness and was rejected overwhelmingly by the electorate because of the internal sabotage that went on. And there was a report.
Question, Rona?
My question is, how do we supersede this? Because if the politics of kindness is not being elected, then how do we supersede the lack of kindness in politics? How do we supersede it with an unkind government? And not just the UK, but in Brazil and in Hungary and other countries that have very, very dictatorial, unkind governments. How do we supersede it?
Thank you for joining in. What do you reckon, Jay?
One of the things that I'd say is that that it's always worth remembering that one of the things that had the most power and opposed itself to Corbyn was the right-wing media. And I think it would have been very, very different for Corbyn if we had a media that wasn't so right-wing, that was kind of, that was broader, that was more truthful. So that's what I would say. I think the other thing is that there are so many aspects, including obviously like sort of proportional representation and things like that. I think that it was absolutely scandalous that when there was a chance to vote that in, the Lib Dems just, I don't know what they were doing, shampooing their hair or kind of taking the dog for a walk, or, it was as if it didn't matter to them because they had a certain amount of power in coalition. But I suppose what I feel about all forms of kind of political engagement is to take part in all forms of it. So, for me, it's kind of, when I have a chance to vote, I will vote Green every time. And I do understand that it can be considered as a lost vote. But at the same time, if enough people vote Green, it starts to be seen, even if the actual candidates don't get in as parliamentarians or councillors, that what is seen is that there is a massive support for those policies. I also think that that kind of that using that lens of kindness is itself a good way of looking at politics, and just saying, rather than saying is this left wing or right wing, saying is it kind? Is it kind to other humans? Is it kind to other parts of life? Is it kind to the future? Is a massively important thing. I hope that answers something.
And we've got another question here from Trevor, and Trevor's asked me to ask this one on his behalf. He says, how do we deploy kindness within institutions led by coercive or dissociative personalities? That's interesting, because we all know institutions don't function as people do. How do we create forms of accountability that have more power than the ones we currently have?
Ouch! It's like, that's such a good point. I suppose, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this, because I don't live in an institution. I don't work in an institution. I'm a writer, which means I am very, very self-employed. But it's an incredibly important point. I'm kind of more laughing at the enormity of it and my inability to answer it. I'm tempted to say kind of, is that something which you've thought about, Trevor, and you kind of have, that you have the sort of backbone of an idea? Even if it's just kind of, okay, to the first thing, to name it and to join forces with people in that institution who can also see that is going on.
Yes, it is interesting, isn't it? Because institutions don't function like people, don't have the same accountability as people, but sometimes have as many rights as people. So that's I think that's got to be a key question for going forward. Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much for this afternoon, Jay. That's been really interesting. And I think that we probably all do need to think a bit more empathically about the environment that we live in. Otherwise, we'll just wake up one day and it won't be there. And it's not just the environment that will suffer, it'll be us. Jay's book is out from all good independent bookstores, Why Rebel? So please do go and get that. And also remember, there we go, there's the cover. And also remember that Conway Hall Ethical Society does do incredible work for ethics and free speech, and that we have suffered as much as anybody has in the last year or so. So if you've managed to make any extra money and you could make a donation, it would be very, very much appreciated. Meanwhile, thank you ever so much to Jay Griffiths for spending her afternoon with us. And I'll see you at the next Conway Hall Thinking on Sunday.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.